Hello and welcome to the first panel of the November edition of the InfoSecurity's Online Summit. My name is Kevin Poirot. I'm a reporter at InfoSecurity magazine and I'm delighted to be your moderator for this session. For the next hour, we are going to discuss how organizations can protect their business with an efficient incident response plan and navigate some of the intricacies of how to use such a plan when your organization is going through a cyber incident. But let me first go through a few bits of housekeeping. First, please note that you can submit any questions using the tab at the bottom of the video screen, whether it's a general question or on incident response or a specific one, or even if you have a specific question for one of our speakers, please do ask them. We have a full hour to discuss this important yet complicated topic, and we'll do our best to answer all the questions before the end of the session. We will also be running some polls throughout the session, so please do join in with those. I would just want to stress that there are no wrong or right answers. They're just a great way for our panelists to know more about you and more about what you'd like to know and more about the audience members as well, so that they can inform you better. And additionally, all of our sessions qualify our viewers for CP and CPD credits based on a minimum attendance time. So please view the documents in the resources tab at the bottom of your screen for all information about CPE credits. Finally, do head to our sponsor section, which can be found also in the resources tab, and take a look at who are supporting this event. So I would like to introduce the session with a staggering number, which might or might not surprise our panelists, but it certainly surprised me. So according to a recent report by the UK government, the report is called the Cybersecurity Skills in the UK Labour Market 2023, a bit of a mouthful. According to this report, a quarter of businesses don't regard incident response skills as essential. What's worse, almost half say they weren't confident they could put together an incident response plan. Unsurprisingly, given these numbers, 41% of the respondents said they were not very or not at all confident that they would be able to deal with a cybersecurity breach or a cyber attack. So this survey has prompted Phil Robinson, principal security consultant and founder of Prism InfoSec, to write a column on our website, InfoSecurity magazine, called "Why Businesses Ignore Incident Response at Their Peril." You can check out in the documents attached to this session. These stats are quite jaw-dropping for people in the cybersecurity community, where we keep hearing experts insisting that cyber attacks are no longer an if, but a when. But I guess we also live in a bubble. So today, I want to get out of this bubble and inform anyone watching this with some practical tips and pieces of advice to draft an efficient incident response plan and action it when needed. So to discuss this today, I have with me three wonderful speakers, which I will let introduce themselves. Maria, do you wanna start?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining this session today. My name is Maria Else. I work for Rock Automation. We are an industrial automation company. So I'm here to help when we talk about incident response related to automation, industrial control system production environments.
Thank you. Serge, do you wanna follow?
Yes. So my name is Serge Ross. I'm on the board of FIRST, the Forum of Incident Response and Security Teams. That's kind of an umbrella organization that brings together nearly 700 security teams from around the globe. So we have members from over 100 countries, and it's really the work that these members do that we're going to talk about today.
Thank you. And Francesco, do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Yes, hello everyone. Thanks for inviting me. My name is Francesco Chiarini. I'm here as the founder of High Value Target, which is actually a concept. We'll talk about it later. I'm as well the chairman of the ISSA.org Cyber Resilience Special Interest Group, and I've been over 15 years in incident response in major global organizations, and it's great to be here.
Great, thank you so much. One last thing before we start the conversation, I would like to share our first poll question so that we have a better understanding of who you members of the audience are. So the question is, does your organization have a cyber incident response plan ready in case of a cyber incident? So the answers are yes, a dedicated team has been named with allocated roles, and the steps we will need to take are very detailed. Or yes, we have a basic plan ready for with a few remediation steps, or no, or not sure. So I'll just post the. Yep. I'll just post the first poll question now. Yes, start. So I have my first question for our panelists is a bit of a definition and maybe a bit more than just a definition, but what exactly is a cyber incident response plan? Francesco, do you want to maybe start with this one?
Sure, that's a big question. I mean, first of all, I mean the incident response plan should start from very clearly defining what we consider a cybersecurity incident, right? I mean, just definition as a basic piece, which is any suspected or confirmed event where confidentiality, integrity, or availability have been compromised. Then we can discuss about the tweaking this, but that's basically the NIST guidance and as well the first.org. The incident response plan is really at the foundation of any threat informed defense organization. The list of the services that are provided by the threat informed defense organization is part of a framework, right? Which is first.org CSIRT framework is the best. But then the incident response plan is one of these key fundamental artifacts that, in my view, should be, well, technology agnostic as much as possible and needs to be aligned with the risk appetite of the organization in the way how we actually want to address the reduction of likelihood of impact, right? Because a lot of the things we do as security professionals is going to be geared towards reducing the likelihood of occurrence. So through the protect and the identify pillars of the NIST cybersecurity framework, just to take one. But then, yeah, so the incident response plan is one that actually helps you meet through a number of controls as well defined, in NIST 161, for example, for the response piece, but around, response and contingency planning as well in the most advanced organizations. So I think the key elements are going to be, and here Serge is going to add to it for sure as part of the first.org role, but it's going to be defining the roles and responsibilities, right? The high level workflows. Once again, to me, it should be as much as technology agnostic as possible. But then, and this is probably my focus area where I've mostly been most of my time is as well looking at the technicalities. I know that, and today we discuss, it's not just about the technicalities, it's as well about the soft piece, but on the technicality side, that's where I've been mainly focusing myself on. So looking at exactly what are the run books, what are the playbooks that we then execute. So there needs to be tie-in from that plan into these emergency contingency plans. And lastly, I would say is really a matter of it should be like a fundamental document that then plugs into the broader crisis management plan, right? And as well should be interlinked with other type of plans, for example, the disaster recovery plans or business contingency plans, again, for the mature organizations.
Thank you. There's one thing that I found really interesting in what you said, and because I didn't think it was the case. You say an incident response plan should be as much technically agnostic as possible. Where when we think about cybersecurity, sometimes we think about cybersecurity solutions and the technologies that we use to secure our networks and secure the internal and external networks. Why do you think it should be technology agnostic or technically agnostic?
The CSIRP as the holy grail of the response team, right? To me, that at least that should be really agnostic, meaning that technologies will come and go, And even in the way how you actually reach certain control objectives in a broader security program, we try to build these objectives in a way that they are technology agnostic. So for example, if you want at the end to have a tool that performs deception, right? In the way how you describe a control objective, you will say that you want to introduce unpredictability into the way how you architect the environment. So you see, it's kind of I think around the finessing of the objectives that you want to describe. So in the plan, you will of course rely on certain technology components, right? Like EDR, and the list will be huge, but that's to me more into that's more a how, while the CSIP to me, I'm interested to see what my colleagues have to say, is going to be anyway more on the what and the why, possibly more on the what, probably. Don't know, Serge and yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, you're gonna be surprised what kind of technologies you tend to discover during an incident that you had no clue were in your network before. I think one of the reasons organizations get compromised is that they don't really know the networks, they don't know the technology that's in there, and you need to be able to deal with these things. And incident response is not about knowing in detail how this database works. It's about actually protecting the assets, be this a specific database, be this a specific service. And you're going to have specialists for each of the technologies in your organization, and you're going to work together with these. It's not that you send everybody home during an incident, and then it's just the incident responders who have to know the whole show. The incident response team much more is the organization that works together with all the others. And I think that's also a bit of really good news. Like when you said at the beginning, so many organizations don't have a security team. And I think one of the reasons that they don't have a security team is that they probably feel overwhelmed. They think, oh, we have to make this huge investment, and we have to cover all the things that were just mentioned. But you can actually start fairly small. You can start with a small security team, just a few people, but you make sure that you know the right people, the key stakeholders in your organization, so that during an incident, you can actually call these people and orchestrate the response. And so incident response isn't a mega investment. There's small organizations that don't even have a real full-time team. They just have a couple of people that actually say, okay, we want to be prepared for an incident, and if something happens, we can work with the rest of the organization to get things done.
It's the right people, processes, and procedures in place,
Yes.
right? And everybody knowing their roles and responsibilities and what they need to do when and if something happens. If you don't have those people, they're not educated in what they need to do, then how are they going to act when that cyber incident happens? From our perspective, we talk a lot about business continuity and understanding the risks around business. So, we need to make sure our customers are able to produce, able to, manufacture their goods, processes, services. And when we talk about business continuity, we talk about, if something was to happen, what are those steps and actions that you need to take to, reduce downtime? Because manufacturing, is the goal of our customers. Thinking about remediating, and decreasing maintenance costs associated with a potential impact and vulnerability. So there are, many different things that we want our customers to think about as they think about business continuity and how they can recover and respond from an incident in a much shorter period of time. So the people, the processes, and the procedures are really important to have in place, from an IR perspective.
Yes,
And
I totally agree.
Oh yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
I totally agree, and it is about people, because at the end of the day, it's people that attack you, and that's what makes protecting against incidents so much more difficult than protecting against, I don't know, the weather and stuff like this, because the weather is kind of predictable. People are not. So you need to prepare as much as you can, and people need to kind of know what they're doing during an emergency. It's not something you should kind of freelance and just make up on the spot. There's going to be enough surprises to keep the people that like freelancing happy. So the better prepared, the better you are off. So
Yeah, I think actually, and just to add to this, I think that once again, like the incident response plans is really a good one. Is actually you can read it almost as a process, right? And as you said, like should have predictable and repeatable outcomes regardless of the technology or actually the attack surface we are addressing, cloud, non-cloud, OT, or so. Clearly there are delicate dynamics to consider in this, but I just have in front of me the first.org services framework, and the outcome of a response plan is actually it's written that is an agreed plan that meets business requirements by blah blah blah, delivered by the available resources and so on. So I think the CSIRT, the incident response team, is one of the components described in incident response plan. And that's a set of people as resources, but the plan itself as a resource is actually kind of a process, right? And I'll ping as well here the link for the audience just to go and take a look.
And so, since it's a process, could one of you maybe walk us through how to start, what to start with when you want to, let's say you don't have an incident response plan yet, and you want to start yours. What do you start with? What are the few key steps that you need to start with?
I think from our perspective, we talk to our customers a lot about understanding the associated risk with respect to their processes, their business continuity. And we always talk, I mean, our whole approach to cyber is around NIST, right? And if you don't understand your key assets, your crown jewels, so to speak, if you don't understand what you have, how can you start to define to protect it, and how are you going to respond and recover those incidences, those assets, if there is an actual incident? So we quite often speak in the terms of maybe carrying out a risk assessment to understand what's critical and what's not, and then start that response plan around focusing on those critical assets. From a starting point, because it could be, as we were saying earlier, it could be seen as significant, but actually if the smaller you start, then you can start to build on that and go forwards from that perspective. So understand what you've got so you can start to work out how you protect it if they are ever attacked.
Yes, and then, I mean, once you know this, there's kind of what we call the incident management cycle. There's a couple of these out there, and you find these if you Google them. It doesn't really matter specifically which one you take. It's kind of important that you have one that you feel comfortable, and they typically go with is along the lines of you need to prepare, so you need to know who to phone. So that's a classic. People have all the phone numbers kind of in a Word document saved somewhere, but the computers are all ransomed, so you cannot access this, so you cannot phone anymore. So maybe have it on a piece of paper. That's the preparation part. And then the next step is that you need to have the ability to detect incidents. That is something that a lot of organizations actually fail. In my experience, about half the organizations having a breach don't discover this themselves. They're notified by third parties that they have an issue. And this may be customers that say, hey, I can no longer access your systems. It may be other security companies that say, hey, we see strange activities coming from your networks, stuff like this. But once you have detected this, then you need to have people, and that's really when the incident response plan becomes active as opposed to the incident response management. Then you have to have the team that needs to get to work. And there's a couple, in my experience, really simple things that helps you to follow. First of all, make sure that you have someone that leads the incident response things. You cannot handle this with having 15 people in charge of the same thing, because then they just step on each other's toes. This doesn't have to be the most senior guy. I know one large hyperscaler who just puts the person in charge that actually finds out about this first. And that can be a fairly junior person. Yep. Then the other thing that people always kind of fail is that they don't have the communications in place. They don't know their partners. They cannot communicate to their customers. They cannot communicate to their partners and suppliers. You need to be able to do this during a large incident. You need to be able to tell your customers, hey, we experiencing an issue here. That's what it means for you. And I would say most incident response cases that go haywire are the ones where people communicate badly. Then also you need to be prepared to know about your legal obligations. Things GDPR. I mean, there's sometimes if you work in a regulated environment, think finance, there's reporting obligations. You need to know this beforehand, otherwise you slow things down. And I think if you have this in mind and you write this down in a process that suits your organization, then you're already in a fairly good place. But because then the incident response team knows how to start, how to get run, and you write down the technical details, the details about what to do that really fits your specific situation, and that really is specific to an organization, and is specific also to the environment. If it's just office automation or e-commerce, then that's going to be different from operational technology. You cannot just shut down the electronics of a plane taking off just because something has gone wrong.
No.
Or there is differences, but you have to think about these. You have to think about a plan. What are you going to do if X happens?
My take would be like, from my experience, I've seen this addressed in two ways. So one way, which is more tactical, or and I see that people responded on your first on the question. So 34% of people actually have a basic plan ready and so on. So for those, for like the way to start at a basic level, in my view, could be even just to see what are your current capabilities, because maybe someone has budget restrictions and so on. So you start with a pragmatic approach where you look even at, and I've seen this done in a few places. You start just looking, what can we detect? What are the incident types that realistically we are able to detect now? And then that is the preparation and detection and analysis phase of the two of the four phases of incident response process. And then you define your incident response plan based on the capabilities that you can realistically define. Another approach, which is more like holistic and probably more complete, which is probably for the 45% that already have responded that they have a very detailed plan, is actually taking it from business impact analysis discussion, and looking at the timelines, the maximal tolerable downtimes, the various what the business says that they can actually tolerate, what defines severe or extreme plausible events, and then based on these, you can define what are the critical assets that you need to protect, and then you continue building, right? Then the response procedures will need to be in line with the risk appetite for the given functions, because maybe one function can tolerate more impact, and so as a result, your incident response plan playbooks can say, okay, well, don't take off the device immediately, just maybe wait a little bit, just consult with partners, and then you take the action. This is kind of finessing, fine-tuning. In other environments, you will say, okay, well, if you don't know the risk tolerance for a given entity within your team, your company, then you say, okay, in that case, risk tolerance 0, just bring it down. I don't care. I don't need to make forensic later, which as well has, it's a difficult decision to take. There's one thing I'd like to expand on. I don't know if it's now the right time, Kevin, or not, but still part of the preparation phase to me, which is, and I know that Maria before mentioned the crown jewels. So when I heard that, my brain went thinking about, do we really want to mainly focus on the crown jewels when we address our recovery plans and response plans, or do we want to look a bit broader at various type of assets, right? So that's one viewpoint that I'd like to expand. I don't know just now, Kevin, keep me honest if you want to go first to the poll or.
Yeah, no, but go ahead.
Okay, so I mean, again, in the I think that let me see how I can move the slides. There you go. Yes. So I prepared like just two super basic slides just to basically provoke a bit the thinking of our audience, and as well very interested to hear your views. I think that we need to the most successful organizations that can handle with severe and extreme plausible incidents are those that will not only look at where the most valued data is stored, or trade secrets and intellectual property, and of course secrets as like corporate directory secrets. I didn't want on purpose to mention any vendor here, but rather classes of assets. So what you see on the bottom right is typically what ends up most of the times in a security strategy, as well in incident response plans and in disaster recovery plans. And so, but failing to actually really having a very thorough process to identify all the other types of assets can actually hinder really the progress and hinder the response capabilities, right? We've seen it in various cases. Like look at even the recent MGN casinos event. I know it's a bit, we all talk about it, but I think that you have seen there different types of impact, the multifaceted type of attacks that adversaries are able to run. They may include like a end goal, which is take down the crown jewel or exfiltrate data that is of value so that you can demand a ransom. That's the last impact. But then there's at least another one or two impacts in between. One is compromise some key credentials as part of the kill chain. We all know it, okay? But that's, you compromise certain secrets, and then that's one type of target. And then you pivot into a type of target that actually allows you to widespread the impact all around. Like, for example, virtualization. So you see here the various other categories, which this is a part of the high value target methodology, where you actually just you possibly are able to elaborate on, okay, these are the critical assets that you want to really look at and ensure that your incident response plans covers those. Going into a bit more granular level of detail, but we'll not spend too much time on this. Here is like, you can see what is the adversarial viewpoint on your assets. So we believe that we have assets that actually increase our security posture, right? And of course they do. At the same time, they can be misused and they can be turned against us by the adversaries, right? And so that's part of some research and work I'm doing as well with various communities globally to just ensure that that we account for this. What, for example, Serge mentioned earlier around the communications. So again, a well-coordinated attack, we try to compromise as well the communication channels that the defenders or the responders have. That's why there are various crisis tools and various out-of-band tools that nowadays are leveraged by incident response teams, so that they have these additional layers of redundancy, right, in the way how they communicate. Imagine an adversary compromising one of your communication channels, or compromising one of your team members, their team site and so on. They can gain a lot of insights on how you're planning to defend. I don't know what the others think on this, but I believe that having a very clear position in the incident response plan on what's the business impact that we can tolerate, and as a result, what are the asset types, the critical assets that you want to really defend, I think it's quite important.
Agreed. And we go through those types of scenarios with our customers, understanding what's critical, the critical assets, critical processes, how we can help maintain and secure those processes, what can we wrap around to maintain the integrity. We don't often talk about potentially the effects of a compromise with respect to product quality and safety. We've seen a lot of critical infrastructure being affected in the past, so we really want to make sure that there's safety in product as well. So having those response plans in place to mitigate further spread of a vulnerability is going to absolutely be key in critical infrastructure. So everything that we do with our customers related to the whole strategy around cyber and improving their posture, is there to help them in the event of a potential issue vulnerability. When we talk to our customers, we often follow, the whole process and that journey around NIST and incident response is kind of what we talk to at the end. So we'll go through all those risk mitigation strategies, we put those prevention detection methods in place, and then we'll talk about incident response. And maybe it's the wrong time to do that. Maybe we should talk about incident response up front and have that strategy in place. So because it's, as we said earlier, it's not an if, it's a when. So when that when happens, the response is in place, and then we can still start to build and expand on that, following on from some of those other strategies. So I think it's good to bring it to the forefront of the discussion when we talk to, a cybersecurity journey, and then all of those tools that we can use to help improve our posture will then relay into that incident response plan as it grows and develops with us, because it's not stationary, it's ever changing, and we need to, update and accommodate that response plan to align with the ongoing changes and threat vectors that we have. So I think it's important to understand those tools and processes, and also to understand the risk that we have, and being able to respond and recover, and having the backups and those systems in place is going to be key to mitigation.
Mm-hmm. And speaking about cybersecurity journey, we have Joe Greenwood, member of the audience, who is asking. It's kind of a follow up from the question I asked earlier, but we partly answered it. But he has a specific question on what can he know, what does he need to know about incident response as an entry-level job candidate? So Joe is starting into his cybersecurity journey. What are maybe the 3-5 things that he needs to start with?
I think if you want to move into incident response and become an incident responder, there's a couple of things you have to ask yourself. First of all, and during big incidents, that always kind of becomes obvious that there is people that really thrive. They really, that's how they function at their best during incidents under high stress. But there's the others that actually do exactly the opposite. They kind of get paralyzed. They get freaked out. And so I think if you want to move in there, you have to figure out what type are you? Are you somebody that can actually work in an environment with a lot of unknowns? Because during an incident, especially at the beginning, you don't really know what's going on. You just know something is going on. And you have your plan that helps you to try to find the answers. So an incident response plan doesn't give you the solutions. It doesn't say you click here and then the hacker is kicked out. It tells you this is where you're going to look. And then based on what you find, here's what you're going to do. But you have to be able to live with this thing, and you don't have the time to kind of investigate this for 3 days before you take action, because you typically have to hurry. So you have to find a balance. So I think the first thing that you really need to know and try to figure out is this something you enjoy? Because a lot of people actually don't, and some do very much. And I think that is a very important thing. And then hopefully if your company or employer does security right, most of the time you're actually not doing incident response. So it's don't see yourself as kind of the Hollywood stereotypical hero that every day saves the company and the world from doom. It's most of the time you're preparing, you kind of you do monitoring, and you have to be able to kind of switch between this fairly standard work to quite quickly become activated and work really intensely, and also work overtime. Also, if you kind of the 9-to-5 type, don't go into security, because incidents always happen Friday evening. And I mean, that would be my answer to this. If you a curious person that wants to learn and enjoys never having to do the same thing twice, then incident response is probably the right place for you. If you don't enjoy that, maybe it's not. And But to what was mentioned before, I'd like to add something, and that is so an incident response plan is not something we do once and then it sits there on the desk. And maybe it's a little too early in the discussion, but a big part of incident response is actually kind of post-instance response, where it's really the time to go over your instance response plan and look what has gone well, what hasn't gone well. And again, this sounds kind of tedious, but I think it's actually great news, because it means you not really have to have everything in place and have an humongous kind of 50-page instance response plan. Start with the basics, start with something you can handle. And the framework that has been mentioned, the first framework, is a pretty good place to kind of start looking at what is on the menu, but don't expect to have everything there. And then as incidents occur, and they will occur, you figure out, oh, there's something we completely overlooked. And in my experience, there's always something we overlook, despite our best efforts. Don't let that put you down. That's just part of it. There's this thing about lifelong learning, and that certainly applies to instance response, because the bad guys adapt. They change. Technology changes. Has there ever been a week where there was no new technology coming out? So you have to adapt. And again, that's something, if you want to go into cybersecurity, be prepared to relearn what you're doing pretty much every month.
One of the things that I don't know, Joe, if I understand as well. Well, this is a great overview. I agree with everything Serge has just said. I think one more thing, like if you were, for example, to then say, okay, I want to actually really apply for the jobs and so on as entry level, then one of the things that with my teams we used to have quite a lot of fun together with the candidates was actually to give scenarios, because I think what we really want to observe is the critical thinking, right? And I see some of the questions there like focus on response during zero-day attacks or like VM and so on. The matter is, the process at the end, the thinking process is oftentimes the same. You have some resources that have been abused in ways that they were not potentially designed to actually, be used in that specific way by the adversary. So you have to think oftentimes about, we start with the triage process. Okay, what has happened? What is where is the patient zero? Are we able to identify it? And then you start analyzing there. You start following the various indicators that you see. So I think really this critical thinking is key, in my opinion. So expect some type of scenarios, like you have this situation, what would you do? And then the person with not necessarily only technical, of course, even technical, but then you can go from there. In terms of things that you must, in my opinion, absolutely know if you apply for incident response role is NIST 861 and first, the CSIRT framework. These are kind of must-have. Then if you want, you can even look deeper at some other type of playbooks, but those are all nice to have. But I think probably what people want to see is to ensure that we refer to some authoritative frameworks most of the times. And so the candidates should do this research, and these resources, I think they are kind of universal.
Great, thank you. And we'll as you said, we're going to move later on to how to use and to leverage an incident response plan during and after an incident. But I just wanted to do two things before that. I wanted to launch the second poll question. So as you mentioned, Francesco, a lot of our respondents for the first poll question did have or do have an incident response plan, either very detailed or not. So I'd like to know what challenges you're facing in developing an effective incident response plan. So the first answer is developing a comprehensive plan that includes steps to remediate incidents and protect data. Second answer is identifying the right people to form a dedicated incident response team. The third answer is deciding who is responsible for what. The other answer is knowing who to call for every event that might happen. And finally, testing the plan regularly to ensure that it is effective. So I'll start the poll now. And I wanted to do a second thing before we move on to the during and after. We have just mentioned a little bit, but we have not dig deep dug deeper into the incident response team. Serge, you talked about one thing that was important was to know who to call, but also I think one thing that is probably important for our listeners is to know who to include and to what level of knowledge to include in the incident response team. Do you include technical people? Do you include the C-suite? Do you include the CISO? And who is responsible to know when to push the button, basically?
So that's a really good question. I think in terms of composition, in my experience, it makes sense to have a fairly diverse instance response team. You want to cover you want to have people that understand most of the technologies you are using. I mean, if you are in an OT environment, but none of your instance responders ever touched a device like this, they won't really be able to gauge this. But so in my all teams, we typically had people that were good on forensics. We had people that were good on network stuff. There were other people who were good on detection. And these don't have to be kind of the top-notch experts in everything, because these you should have in your operational teams. But the incident responder need to be able to really talk the real talk to these people. They need to have a technical understanding. In my experience, it's also, I think, a good advice not to have purely managerial or C-suite people in the instance response team, but you need to have someone who can talk to them. So communication is fairly important, because during an incident, you are going to communicate. And that's why I think a lot of the instance response people are a bit special in that they usually are reasonably good in talking to others. That's not always a requirement in technical professions, but I think for effective instance response, you need to also be able to communicate with others. And an instance response lead clearly needs to be able to talk to the C-level, because these people will be freaked out and you need to calm them down. You also don't want these people to start micromanaging you, but that's about the worst thing that can happen. And it's like in the real world, if your building is on fire, you don't want to have the C-level people taking the hose in hand. We leave this to the firefighters. And so I think that really is important. You need technical people, but you also need people who kind of can keep the view of what is the main goal. This is not about finding out what has been happening on this tiny little VM here in detail. This is about, let's make sure this VM doesn't create any troubles, and then let's move on.
Yeah, it's really important, actually. If you think about in a production environment and you've got processes where some are, are critical and they follow a particular phase, but understanding if you have to shut down part of your process, what are the wider implications of that? So having those that understand your production elements, how it all integrates, and what the implications of doing something to a particular area is going to be key, because you don't want to create a wider incident and a safety incident potentially from shutting down a particular process. So those are some of the key things and key personas that you'd have to have engaged in a response plan.
And in an OT environment, do you need to include other types of people, maybe more technical people? Because I know that the machines that are running are quite technical. Sometimes some of them are legacy. Sometimes there's not that many people that know how they work. Is that something that you need to consider?
Absolutely. If you have to shut a machine down or a process down and you don't do it correctly, then it could be a safety incident. It's absolutely going to affect you if you don't shut down cleanly when you want to start back up again, and it will take you longer to recover from that. So yes, technical people in a production environment are absolutely critical as part of your incident response plan.
I'd like to throw in something that actually relates to the constituency and the authority that we give to the team, because defining the team, in my view, it often that has been fairly easy. I mean, yeah, you define your peer teams that you need to collaborate with. For example, if you work with, I don't know, a cloud provider to deliver certain type of monitoring or response activities, then you need to have their phone numbers, their details. Or if you have a network team, network security team, that is your NOC, and you collaborate with them and so on, and the list goes on and so on. Plus you need to have obviously law enforcement contacts and various other contacts and so, but this is well defined from number of years, right? At least from 1998, when the first RFC entered into the IETF standard for dealing with security incidents. A key thing that I faced challenging over time responding to incidents has been on the authority, because unfortunately the incidents oftentimes they happen in the weekend when people are unavailable, overnight when the asset owner is unavailable, whether it's on a production floor or so, and you suddenly see there's something suspicious going on, you need to triage. Well, you have the list of the contacts, you call, no answer. You call the level up, no answer. And then oftentimes, you may be actually even left in a way on your own, where you have, your analyst team that is there. They tell you something, you're the manager or director, and then you need to take a decision. Do you let this suspicious activity keep happening and spreading, possibly propagating, or do you actually take a decision, even if, for example, your boss is up, may as well be, they may be unavailable, it's not their shift turn and so on. Like, what is this? How do you take these type of decisions? Yeah. So again, it has implications in terms of because unfortunately, you're on your own at that stage, and I think that a key point in defining the team is as well defining who has the authority for what. Because suppose that we take the decision to remove these assets from the network, kill these connections, blacklist certain, blocklist certain network connections at, I don't know, hardware level or so, then you may bring down production that can have multi-million dollar implications. And then bringing it back, so the failback piece or the recovery piece may not be possible at times. So then really complex situation. So I think when we talk about the definition of the team, we need to address as well the authority. That would be my suggestion.
And I wanted to move now to how to how to leverage the incident response plan that you've got when something happens, when you're hit by a cyber incident or a cyber attack or another type of incident. And the members of the audience have given us a great opportunity, great cases, great use cases. So we have two people asking you to maybe talk a bit about how to execute an incident response plan. One during a 0-day attack, and another one was mentioning during a ransomware attacks that happens. And they said assume that this took place in a big server with multiple VMs. Could you maybe answer these questions?
Go ahead, Francesco.
I mean, maybe I just take the first one on the 0-day.
Yeah.
I mean, the matter is with the 0 days, well, typically you will have those confined to certain type of assets, right? So for example, a 0-day on VPNs, right? Or 0-day on these type of assets. And so that's at least the most common scenario. So in that case, like in the most mature organizations, probably what you need to have is you need to monitor not just what goes out and published on the vulnerability DBs of various sources. Take NIST as an example, because that's just probably the last step of when something has been going through validation and then vetted and exploitability proven and everything. Probably what you want is for your critical assets, you want to monitor early on when something gets published but still not completely doesn't still have like a CVSS score assigned. So you want to just monitor for your critical assets because you should have a higher level of assurance requirement for those in line with your risk appetite. So possibly suppose that I consider my VPNs now. Suppose this is a 0-day on VPNs. Suppose that I consider my VPNs as something critical in terms of assets because they are on the outside, they are exposed to an untrusted network, and for various other reasons, I consider them critical. Then I should have a clear inventory of all of these assets. And then if the 0-day is addressed, then you should set up an immediate team in the preparation phase to actually triage what can happen, what can go wrong. Potentially, you could even, take down certain VPNs in that case to just reduce your attack surface. But then I think in that mindset, you need to know, are your threat actors possibly going to target VPNs? So that's another discussion on threat informed defense. I think so. The first thing really around the 0-day in that case is, address it through another one specific service within the incident response framework, which is rather related to vulnerability management in that case, and the response is going to be most of the times, if possible, take the devices offline if you have really like zero risk appetite, and you can actually take the impact of not having them online. The suggestion would be, of course, wait until vendor recommendations are available. Again, it's down to the decision. It depends on each organization. I don't know, guys, what you think.
Yes, I mean, it's if you learn about a vulnerability or a breach, and then, I mean, if you can take the system offline, that's good, but sometimes you can't. It's just for various reasons. It's like if you're a big e-commerce website, the business unit probably feels, hey, we're gonna lose a lot more money if you just take the whole thing offline. So you're gonna take mitigating measures. So that means you're gonna up the monitoring. So to actually see that you have access that shouldn't be there and be able to kick this out. I remember once we had a case where this was in an organization where they treat the patients, and we discovered an incident with one of the machines that we could not take this machine offline. That just was not possible, because that would have killed the entire facility to treat these patients. So we built kind of devices around this to protect from this particular thing without being able to fix the root cause. These are measures, I mean, you have to start thinking a little bit about also, is the vulnerability already exploited? Did you see exploits? I mean, you see this quite often. Actually, there is an issue, you get a warning, and then you see if it's exploited or not. Then you can take measures. And it's also, I think, important to notice that incidents don't just drop down in the middle of the room. It's, you learn something goes wrong, you get a report, hey, there's a 0-day. You first have to check if you even apply. So this ramps up slowly. And I think, especially if you have very little time, it's important to take some time and not to just rush in and do what I call the chicken yard incident response process, where everybody runs around and makes a lot of noise and potentially creates a lot of damage. I mean, it's important to keep your nerves and start thinking about what is it that you can do. The same is for a ransomware incident. It's first of all, you have to find out how big is this incident. Is it only a few VMs that are affected? Is it already the entire IT infrastructure that's affected? Because then there's really no point in shutting stuff off. Quite often, shutting stuff off during operations causes a lot of damage, and so incident response in the first stage often is about containment. Make sure it doesn't spread, and hopefully you have prepared so that you're not like kind of a nut where it's hard outside, but once you're in, it's all soft and juicy. You have segregated networks, and then you have to find out where's the attacker, what is affected, and then take measures. If your entire organization is being completely compromised, I mean, it's rare that you come to the office and then everything is down. And it can happen, especially with ransomware, it can happen. But then it's really unplugging and recovering. There's not much of incident response that you can do.
So, but bottom line, don't run around like a headless chicken.
Absolutely. That's why you need a plan.
Maria, do you have any other common mistakes that you've seen during when during an incident, in terms of like how people approach and treat their incident response plan?
Yeah, it's being able to identify, potentially the asset is actually affected, and understanding that, the different steps to get there. You're right, it's not a single incident that's going to occur. It's understanding. So we often use the example as, I don't know, someone's initiated a remote connection into the environment. Is that a valid connectivity? Is it malicious? So it's understanding whether that's needed or not. So that in itself may not be a vulnerability, but if they start to do things within the environment that potentially are malicious, so being able to correlate different activities together and then stopping it before something else occurs is going to be really important. So it's knowing what's good behavior and what's anomalous. That's going to be some of the key strategies to mitigating potential risk. And then, as Sergio already said, having some level of segmentation. So if you think about a production environment where you've got different areas of production, different processes, if it's sequential, can we potentially mitigate a risk to a particular segment of the network? So having the correct level of segmentation is going to be key. One of the great terms that I learned recently is like the blast radius. How do we make a smaller blast radius so we stop things spreading across the entire network? So understanding what you need to potentially block and take offline. When we're supporting OT environments, don't block straight away, right? We work with the customer to understand what the risk associated with that potentially affected asset is. Do we need to take it offline? Does it need to be blocked, or can we, carry out other mitigating steps to prevent further spread? So it's really understanding your environment, what's going to happen, and what steps we can do to mitigate without affecting production and taking out an entire plant.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much.
I think as well, it's once once the 0 day is executed, that's kind of at the end. What the adversary wants to do at that stage is what they want to either deny the control of the asset, they want you to lose the asset, they want you to lose productivity. So that's already an impact discussion, yeah. And so as a result, what you need to do is you need to minimize the magnitude of the impact at that stage. So some other, resources I find very useful, especially for 0 days, which are notoriously, once the exploits are communicated, they can be quite impactful. And as well, there is a lot of unknown, is to actually prepare thoroughly for this. Again, looking at the critical assets, and then looking at the TA0040 from MITRE, which can actually help you quite a lot, MITRE attack. Looking at the last step of the kill chain, and as well looking at the cyber resilience recommendations from MITRE, CREF, the engineering framework. There's the specific techniques, especially as well for ICS and SCADA OT devices that can address specific type of losses. Again, denial of control and others that can be very useful in planning like a thorough set of playbooks. Yeah, this is my take.
Great. Well, thank you so much, all three of you. This is all we have time for today. But just maybe one word on what people should take away. Just one word, because we're really running out of time.
So my advice really is get started on writing your incident response plan and take it from there. It doesn't have to be perfect when you start. Just start working on it now.
Great. Thank you. Maria?
No, I agree. Is get that incident response plan in place, right? There's lots of things that we can do to protect our environments, but you've got to be able to respond, because it's a when, if, not an if.
Great. Thanks. Francesco, one word?
I think know your critical assets. You can't defend everything, and then focus on the holistic picture. Try to address that, but specifically look at the critical assets.
Great. Thank you so much for thank you all three of you for joining us, and thank you all of the audience members for taking the time to hear us as well. Don't miss our next session in 15 minutes. where my colleague James Coker will be joined by seasoned cybersecurity professionals to discuss cyber risk management for organizations and how leaders can integrate it into organizational management processes. On that, that's a goodbye from me.
Bye, everyone. Have a nice day.
Thank you.